Welcome back to the show. On the show today, we have journalist, screenwriter. We have Ron Chepesiuk. Ron, thanks for being on the show today. So before you left, we were just talking about the Harlem Gangsters and all the famous names. So for our viewers, in a brief way, link up Frank Matthews, Frank Lucas, and Nicky Barnes, because the last two names are super popular because of the television and all that, right?
Right. Nicky, yeah, right. Nicky Barnes. Well, there are three gangsters that essentially operated in the late 60s and early 70s. Up until that time, the French Connection, you heard about the famous French Connection, was actually mafia controlled. It was controlled by the Italian mafia and all that. And the authorities were having great success against the French Connection, and they were breaking up. And this opened up opportunities for black gangsters at the time. And so you saw the emergence of independent black gangsters. Before this time, they operated solely at the behest of the Italian mafia, but they started to develop their own networks and all that. Frank Matthews had connections in 21 states. Nicky Barnes became famous. They were trying to arrest him, and he was playing games with them. And then he had Frank Lucas, who was the third guy that came out, and all three of them operated at the time. And
wasn't it Frank Lucas who showed up to the Joe Frazier Muhammad Ali fight with a big fur coat?
Well, they all did. They all loved boxing, and they would show up in their chinchilla coats, the famous coats, and with the hats and all that. And that was part of their downfall.
But that's when he got recognized. They're saying,
right.
They got recognized.
Right.
Yeah.
And they became very prominent and easy targets for law enforcement. And my philosophy is don't be a criminal because you're going to get caught. I could count the number of criminals that have gotten away with it on one hand.
So let's talk about this, Ron. So I know obviously like you're super famous. You've talked to, you've interviewed the biggest gangsters in the world. You're award winning. So tell us how, and then we'll get into more of your career because there's so much to talk about. Tell us how you sort of made the jump into the television world now. How did that happen? Like start writing for TV and movies and stuff like that.
Well, it's just a natural progression, slowly but surely, I just developed a career. And like I said, all these documentaries started to show up in the 2000s on gangsters, all these stations, Discovery Channel, ID, History, Biography. I've been on all of them. Started to develop these crime shows. And they're very popular. And, when you're a producer, you're looking for people that can talk about it. You go to Amazon to see what books have been written about it. And my books were there. And so I got called. And then somebody sees me at one show. And then another person says, okay, that guy, I want him on my show. And so it just developed naturally, progression. And right now I'm working on I was in Colombia a couple of days ago for 2 weeks. And I'm working on a documentary for a major cable network on one of the gangsters I wrote about, a guy named Jesus Ruiz Henao. He's called the real Mr. Big, and he was the biggest cocaine dealer ever in Britain. And they call him the first billion-pound kingpin in England. And so I started, I got that, and I just, naturally developed into a so-called expert. I mean, I didn't know an expert, but people thought I was an expert, and that's how I got to the point where I started to appear on various television stations.
Can you share with us or our viewers some of the big productions or some of the big production studios or labels or name brands that people go, oh yeah, like. You know what I mean? I know, like, for instance, Warner Brothers or Sony or, stuff like that. Like,
well, I mean, all the cable networks, you name them.
Really?
I mean, Biography, National Geographic, the Discovery Channel, ID Channel, History Channel.
So what would they do? Take us through a scenario. So if someone was to call you like a producer from one of these networks and they got a new project that they're sort of developing, would they call you and say, hey, Ron, we got this new crime project. We'd love to hire you on as a writer or an expert or as a consultant or something like that? How it works kind of thing? Or you tell us how it works?
what happens. I get an email in my box saying I'm with a social specific production company,
Yep.
and we're doing this or that, and then would you be interested in being a talking head on the show? And then I have a sort of a manager, and I refer them to the manager, and the manager talks with them, and they work out a sort of a deal, and then they come to me and say, okay, this is what we want you to do, and end up you know being on television. I'm probably on television like once a week. Somebody will email me and say, "Hey, I saw you on television," and I said, "What channel was it?" And they tell it what it was, and it was some show I did about 10 years ago, a documentary, and I would end up in the show.
This is great. I love it. Like I have a list here. So let's have this couple names I'm going to throw out there. Like I can't believe I have him on my list. Arafat. Like, tell me your experience with Arafat. Like, oh my god, like Yasser Arafat.
Well,
Like,
it's really ironic because when I went to God, I was in the Gaza Strip.
okay.
This was '97, and you know what happened to the Gaza Strip now, right? It's a
Yeah,
complete
yeah,
mess. There's like
yeah,
35,000 deaths.
yeah.
And I went as a consultant to the PLO on the construction of what they were hoping would be a national library, because at that time there was really optimism that peace was going to come. And so I ended up going there, and it was really funny because at that time the PLO was the dominant faction in the Middle East, and Hamas at that time was very small, and ended up in Gaza City and talking with a lot of these Hamas guys, and they were like small time. It wasn't until about '85 before they took power on that sort of stuff. And then about a year after I left, I was going to come back for the National Library dedication. That's how close they were to peace then.
Wow.
And about a year after that, there was some kind of incident along in Jerusalem, and it just set off a conflagration. And the next thing you know, they're at war with each other.
And they're
And it's
dragging
been
them
that
through the
way,
streets, right? They're dragging
right?
them through the streets.
Right. It's been
How
that way
so?
ever
So
since.
how long before they were dragging him through the streets were you interacting with him? How many years? 2 years? 3 years?
No, but it was about a year,
About a
oh,
year?
2 years,
About
right?
two
And
years.
that, yeah, we actually did a report for them. I went with another librarian, and we did a report. And we said this is what your national library should look like, and we sent it to them. It was 32 pages, and I ended up interviewing Arafat. It was really funny because I didn't think we would get him because he was so busy. Everything
Sure.
flowed through Arafat. And then the last day we were there, he was in three countries, and he was ending up with Madeleine Albright, the Secretary of State for the U.S.
Yep.
In Geneva, and we said, "There's no way he's going to make it back. So we're going to have the interview with him." But anyways, one of his handlers said, "Go and just wait for us to call you." And we said, "Sure." So we went to the bed, and I was falling asleep, and I heard this banging. Someone said, "Wake up! The chairman is here." And
Wow.
we were dressed in our suits, because we were ready to go and all that. So we jumped up, and Ravi Sharma was my partner on this project, and we said, let's go. So we jumped in the limousine, and the next thing you know, you remember Walter Cronkite?
Yep.
That famous, when every time he had Arafat, he was in that one room. It always looked the same. It was exactly the same room, and we were in there, and we couldn't believe it. Next thing you know, we're standing there. Arafat's right in front of us. He came in. He was a little tiny guy, and the thing I noticed, he was shaking. His hand was shaking. It was like that famous picture of Adolf Hitler. You remember?
Yeah.
Where those young kids. It was the same sort of thing. And we found out later he had that cerebral palsy on that. But you never know that because he hid it from the cameras on that. So we sat down with him, and we had prepared an interview that we're gonna we had questions, and we were gonna hit him back and forth and all that. We were prepared for an hour with them. We thought we'd get 45 minutes, which is a lot of time with a person that important.
Sure.
And we ended up 15 minutes.
That's it. Hey, you're done.
His answers were so short. And I realized the problem, while the Israelis are always getting the better of the Palestinians, is that everything ran through Arafat, but he couldn't speak English. He wasn't a very good communicator on that then. And that's why they always lost the battle of communication. on that sort of
Ah,
thing. Right. And so, anyways, we ended up with the interview. I wrote an article, and I got some great pictures, of Arafat.
now
And
were you an independent reporter there, or you were
yeah,
with an outfit?
well, I was a librarian at the time,
You're a
actually.
librarian. Oh wow, that's
Yeah,
great.
I was a librarian. Yeah, but I mean, I'm a reporter. Robbie was Sharma was a reporter, journalist, librarian too.
Yeah, like
And
you weren't with NBC or
right,
ABC at the time or
right,
nothing like that,
right,
right? Yeah.
right.
Okay,
You're
so
right.
let's
So
move on. How about give me some reference to Chomsky?
Chomsky, we ended up. He ended up. I got a radio podcast called Crime Beat,
Yeah.
with Ron Chepesiuk, and it's been on the air since 2011. And we ended up interviewing Chomsky twice for the Crime Beat show on that. And I think I asked him. Our show's an hour long, and I think I asked him 8 questions in an hour because he was a typical professor. He would give these answers, and
Yeah.
you don't want to interrupt him because it's Noam Chomsky, right, on that sort of stuff. And he's a little bit older now, and he's sort of semi-retired, so you don't see him at all. And so we ended up interviewing. People want to listen to the interview. They could go to my website, Crime Beat,
Okay,
on the
let's
August
do
1st.
this. My producer's yelling in my ear. We got to take another break. When we come back, I want to sort of move it forward to today and just get your opinion on the different factions of the true crime world. So stay tuned. You're watching the Today Show. On the show today, we have a special presentation. We have journalist, screenwriter. We have Ron Chepesiuk. So stay tuned. We'll be right back with the Today Show.